right, ladies and gentlemen, Roger Stone's about to take over this hour. Next week, he's testifying in closed session to the Congressional Committee. Even his wife can't go in. So we're going to have reporters there to cover it all, but they want to have him in secret testimony. What they've done with other people that have testified is not let him have a record of it, then make up what they said later. So look for the committee, for Congressman Schiff to say, Roger Stone murdered a child in front of us. He said he loves Stalin. He's married to Putin. I mean, that's what they do. So Roger Stone's here. Paul Manafort, the word is about to be indicted. He's come out and said, listen, criminal investigation of the leaks, which are now confirmed, massive eggy wag all over the face of late-night TV, comedy shows, the Democrats. They're still reeling from that. What is the state of the war, Roger Stone?
You know, it just seems to me, Alex, that the deep state has now been unmasked themselves. Despite their vehement denials of wiretapping, their wiretapping came to the fore in the Manafort case, proving thus in one kind of sweeping move what many in the media had overlooked. The fact, first of all, that Mr. Clapper had testified under oath in front of the Congress regarding the wiretaps in an exchange with Senator Feinstein. He admitted that the widespread parameters focused at Trump Tower. And then when pressed for details, he kept saying, it's just too sensitive. I can't discuss it. It's too sensitive. This also reflects the incredible report back in March when Circa News reported that the FISA court had admonished the Obama NSA for the surveillance of at least 30,000 Americans, saying that this was, if I quote the court, there was an institutional lack of candor, that it raised very serious Fourth Amendment issues. The three networks, of course, ignored all of this. 1 out of every 20 searches by the NSA and their running dog lackeys at the Central Intelligence Agency and the FBI was essentially for political purposes. So
this is massive scandal, 1,000 times bigger than Watergate. I mean, 10,000 times. This is gargantuan. And we also have Comey and the Justice Department lying under oath months ago when he was still director, saying no one has spied on Trump, either through FISA or through the Justice Department, or on any of his surrogates, or on Trump Tower, now a proven fraud. Let's play that clip. Then I asked Stone, why is it coming out now? Here it is.
Director Comey, was the president's statement that Obama had his wires tapped in Trump Tower a true statement?
With respect to the president's tweets about alleged wiretapping directed at him by the prior administration, I have no information that supports those tweets, and we have looked carefully inside the FBI. The Department of Justice has asked me to share with you that the answer is the same for the Department of Justice and all its components. The department has no information that supports those tweets.
Okay. It goes on, but let's just not go to the rest. No components anywhere, anybody, when they are openly doing it and know they are, and had just bragged in the news, we got Trump, we've been spying on him. I mean, this is, talk about a jackknife. I mean, this is an explosion of buffoonery.
Well, Alex, I think notice that he chooses his words very carefully. First of all, I think we've now established without any question that FISA court warrants were being used to surveil Trump associates, including Manafort, Carter Page, and presumably yours truly. I do think that Judge Andrew Napolitano was correct when he said that the M1 was actually conducting the surveillance on Trump himself. This gave their colleagues in the deep state deniability. Notice last week when Sessions said that there was no proof of the spying, he again said, there is nothing in our possession that would indicate that this happened. Now, it is false that Judge Napolitano was suspended by Fox. What happened was a dirty trick. Somebody told the LA Times that after hours on the East, so there was no way to deny it or confirm it. The LA Times ran with it as a story. It got picked up everywhere. In fact, Judge Napolitano was never suspended. He was off the air for 6 days on a planned vacation. Ironic that MSNBC and CNN came back and printed a correction, said he was not suspended. Fox never did so. However, the judge is borne out on May 8th, 2017, when Mr. Clapper, the director of intelligence under Obama, goes to the U.S. Senate. Let me read this exchange. Senator Feinstein. The Guardian has reported that Britain's intelligence service first became aware in late 2015 of suspicious interactions between Trump advisors and Russian agents, and this information was passed on to U.S. intelligence. Over the spring of 2016, multiple European allies passed on additional information to the United States about contacts between Trump, the Trump campaign, and Russians. Is this accurate? This is Yates, the former director. I can't answer that, she says. Feinstein, General Clapper, is that accurate? Yes, it is, and also quite sensitive. Okay, let me ask you about this. The specifics are quite sensitive. I can say no more. There you have it, Alex. Busted. Busted. You take the Circa story by Sarah Carter, which is one of the most extraordinary pieces of journalism that I've seen in the 40 years I've been in politics. Stone cold proof that Rogers, Brennan, Clapper, Rice are spying on thousands of Americans, as many as 30,000, according to the court. And then Mr. Comey is perjuring himself to cover it up.
We'll put the headline back on screen because there it is. It's now admitted they illegally spied on people for political control. Declassified memos show FBI illegally shared spy data on Americans with private parties. So they're caught red-handed. So I'll ask you the question, and then you're taking over. We'll skip this break so you have more time. Why is it coming out now? Because they know, like Conway said months ago, the president's the president. He's in there. He has all this. He knows it's classified, so he's not releasing it, but he knows they're lying. So how does this then go public, and what has smoked them out to now admit they're liars?
What's ironic here is that this was kind of a dead and buried issue. The fact that there was very little media coverage of the Circus story means that the deep state could heave a deep sigh and relax. Dr. Jerry Corsi, on behalf of InfoWars, was really ahead of this curve, writing detailed stories about metadata surveillance, including surveillance of Trump that goes all the way back into the 80s
including
and 90s.
the classified source documents.
Exactly. So Dr. Corsi first picks up the deep state spying on Trump, which has, I think, waxed and waned over the years. He's been on their radar, obviously, for a very long time. Now, Alex, the other thing that is ironic is that it's the Manafort case that brings this all to the fore. In other words, the mainstream media backed into this. When it leaked that Manafort was put back under surveillance by Comey. So recognize what they did here. They have Manafort under surveillance. It bears no fruit. They turn off the tap because there's no evidence of a crime. Manafort goes to work for President Trump, successfully runs his operation at the convention to seize the nomination and to avoid a theft by the Republican establishment, a 1952-style hijacking. And then they put him back under scrutiny during the transition, during the inauguration, at a time that he's in frequent contact with the president-elect and with myself and others.
That's the NSA being used to try to steal elections in America. Unprecedented. Roger, you take over. Incredible.
Thank you, Alex. First of all, I do want to ask you to remember that we here at InfoWars don't have a George Soros or a Ford Foundation or a Rockefeller Foundation writing big checks to keep us alive. Alex Jones has an extraordinarily ambitious expansion planned. In Austin, you can hear them working in the next studio to build a super studio that is more sophisticated and bigger than anything we have already. And I must tell you, we have a great, hidden bunker there in Texas and a lot of talented people. But this studio will be something like anything you have ever seen. But this costs money. And we can't count on big corporate sponsors from the multinational corporations or hidden billionaires like the Clintons and the Media Matters crowd. So we ask you to go to the Infowars.com store. Now, among the things that you can get is the iconic Bill Clinton rape T-shirt. Now, this is a piece of history. If you read my book, The Making of the President 2016, which you can also get at the Infowars.com store, you will learn how Alex Jones put this item into the stratosphere, into the political lexicon. Believe me, folks, this T-shirt will end up in the Smithsonian. There are a limited number of these. This is a limited edition. When these go, that's it. We don't intend to print any more. Yes, you can get them at Stone Cold Truth at the store there as well, but that's all there is. Alex and I essentially divided the stock. So this is something you're going to want to have, something you're going to want to cherish, because it was a way to break through the mainstream media blockade, the roadblock, as it were, the blackout on Bill Clinton's real past. They kept calling him, they said he was guilty of indiscretions or infidelities when the issue was violence against women, rape. So I urge you to go to the site and get your Clinton rape T-shirt now. Also there, multiple other specials. I myself am a giant fan of Brain Force. This stuff is really great for mental clarity and mental energy. You know, when you're working, in some cases, 18-hour days for the cause of freedom, this is an indispensable product. I know that Rick Derringer, the rocker, tells me that he lives by it. I know that Judge Napolitano is a fan, and many people I know use this as a secret weapon. So, again, I commend to you Brain Force. Paul Manafort has dominated the news, and I think it's important to put his involvement with Donald Trump into some prospect. Now, admittedly, Manafort was an usher in my wedding, someone I have known since my college Republicans and young Republican days. Manafort and I both hail from Connecticut. Connecticut is one of the last states in the nation that nominates candidates for governor and senator and all statewide offices in a state convention rather than a primary. A primary can be secondary, but can only be held after nominees are selected in a convention. Manafort came up through the college Republicans, the young Republicans, which are governed by convention's rules, Robert's Rules of Order, and whose structure is identical in terms of the way those organizations operate to the convention of the Republican National Committee. So if you know how to run a young Republican National Convention, you know how to run a Republican National Convention, because the structure, Rules Committee, Credentials Committee, Platform Committee, and so on, are identical. The Republican National Convention is governed not by federal law, not by state law, but by its own rules. In 1952, the Republican nomination for president was hijacked. Senator Robert Taft, a conservative favorite, got to Chicago with enough votes to be nominated, but the skillful convention politics of Dwight Eisenhower stole that nomination when Taft delegates were unseated in Texas and Louisiana, replaced by Eisenhower supporters, and the rest is history. Paul Manafort joined the Trump campaign at a time that Donald Trump had lost Colorado, lost Wisconsin first, then lost Colorado, lost North Dakota, and delegates were stolen from him in Louisiana. Manafort brought a convention expertise that I think is unappreciated. There was, in fact, a rebellion within the Rules and the Rules Committee, which Manafort crushed. Now, it's important to recognize that the Rules and Credentials Committees are made up of 2 members from each state, and prior to Manafort's involvement, no one in the Trump campaign was paying attention to the fact that though Trump might sweep a delegation convention, the 2 appointees to the Rules and Credentials and Platform Committee could be hostile to the candidacy of Donald Trump. Manafort, in my view, not only put on a terrific convention, the highlights of which include the Rudy Giuliani's fiery speech, excellent speeches by the Trump children, and there's no question that Trump aced his acceptance speech, and Manafort left the campaign the legacy of putting the candidate up on teleprompter, letting him riff off of it, but essentially keeping some form to his general election messaging. And this is essentially the grand strategy that Steve Bannon oversaw and pushed. And Manafort was right. Trump was quite effective using this medium. Not like Barack Obama, where he has to read everything off a teleprompter, and God knows Trump can and does riff. Now, Manafort has therefore became a target for the Clinton people. The Clinton people feared Manafort. They knew him well because Manafort had actually done some business with the Podesta brothers. And they had worked together in the Ukraine for a political party and a candidate in a Democratic political election recognized by the United States State Department, and a party recognized by the United States State Department, for which Manafort was paid. That's not the same as lobbying. It is political consulting. But the ledger that the New York Times would write so much about, that showed Manafort taking a payment of $12 million, turns out to be a forgery. As Lee Stranahan revealed here on InfoWars, the prosecutor in that matter now says the ledger tying Manafort to improper payments is a fraud, and that there are no pending charges or case against Manafort. The New York Times, of course, has not put this on page one. Manafort would ultimately resign from the Trump campaign because he knew that his business activities were becoming a distraction. He left reluctantly, but I think loyally, but continued to give advice to President Trump and to members of the Trump campaign. And we continued to confer. It is now clear that Manafort was being surveilled regarding his relationships in the Ukraine, and that surveillance yielded no improper activity. In fact, it was ended. Manafort's surveillance is turned back on immediately after Donald Trump is elected president. This is to spy on Manafort in an effort to find something that could be leveraged against the president. And in fact, we now know that Manafort is surveilled during the transition, during the inauguration, in conversations with President Trump, myself, Jared Kushner, and others. This is a political fishing expedition. I'd also point out to you that it is in this period that Ms. Rice decides that she is going to use the surveillance information to unmask Trump associates. And the reason she tells the Congress for her action is that she learned that President-elect Trump was opening a back channel to the Russians, which he has the authority to do, which is entirely his right and his prerogative as a president-elect, and that he did not yet begin the dialogue. He merely went to a third party or met with a third party to discuss it. So in other words, she is interfering with the president's foreign policy prerogatives. That does not make her use of the data not a crime, although interestingly enough, Trey Gowdy and some other Republicans seem to indicate that they thought this somehow absolved her. I don't see that myself. So it is, at this point, I think the question is, why, in the face of all of this, are they going after Paul Manafort? When they kicked in the door of his apartment at 5 a.m. in Alexandria, Virginia, and then jimmied a lock to get into the bedroom, they were lucky he wasn't carrying a firearm because they had not identified themselves. They then ransacked his entire apartment, were there for 5 hours, and they photographed all of his custom-made, high-end Italian suits. Perhaps they're going to bring a charge against him of taking a tax deduction for these fine garments, but I seriously doubt that he would do so. Those in the business know that many years ago, Ozzie Nelson, the band leader, tried to argue that because he appeared on television, his suits were a business expense, and this was disallowed. So, Alex Jones, don't try that one, although I don't think you would. I have been told by my accountant that there's no chance you can write off the suits. How unfortunate. But they took away 2 different binders of documents, which Manafort had already turned over. What's going on here? Let's be as clear as we can. Mueller seeks to find some charge against Manafort that does not relate in any way to Russia. Money laundering, tax evasion, failure to file with FARA, and then go to Manafort and say, look, Manafort, unless you want to go to jail for the rest of your life, or for a long period of time at least, you'll admit that you were colluding with the Russians, and you'll say that Donald Trump knew everything. In other words, they want him to bear false witness against our president. They want him to lie. Now, this is a man who managed my campaign for Young Republican National Chairman. This is someone I have known my entire adult life. When he was working for Ford, I was working for Ronald Reagan. He's a tough nut. He is a tough customer. He's an Italian-American, and he's very stubborn. He will not lie. He will not roll on our president. He will not bear false witness and say whatever the government wants him to say. I've known Manafort my lifetime, and I think he's done nothing wrong, but they are trying to destroy him financially, as they have me. And when I come back, we'll talk about the House Intelligence Committee. In the meantime, Roger Stone, sitting in for Alex Jones. God bless you, and hit the Infowars.com store because we need your support.
In ancient times, man roamed the earth in a constant state of hunting or being hunted. Introducing Caveman, where cutting-edge science meets ancient super nutrients. Secure your bottle right now at InfoWarsStore.com.